Hello, everybody. It's Thursday, July 21st. It's 2011, and this is Day 9 Daily number 327. We're going to be looking at a lot of Zerg vs. Zerg games from everyone's favorite Sen. Look at how adorable he is. Oh, man. Sen made this himself in MS freaking Paint. And look at the stubble. And look at how I'm bleeding out of my unibrow. This is a remarkable representation of who I am, and I have blonde streaks in this hair. Yes. Feeling good. It's Zerg week right now. Yesterday we did Destiny's Zerg vs. Protoss and Fester focused play. Today we're doing Sen's Zerg vs. Zerg. Next week we'll be doing the Zerg vs. Terran, but it will be a little bit later on in the week because next week is Europe week, which means that the daily will be on at 10 a.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. CEST. That starts on Sunday. I'm doing subscriber mono battles on Sunday, so show up Sunday morning. It should be on the European server. It makes me realize now I need to download a Euro client. But yes, subscriber mono battles will be happening Sunday morning, and followed by Fun Day Monday on Monday, and then on Tuesday we'll finish up Zerg week. And of course, after all that, I'm at MLG Anaheim. Go there. It's awesome. It's on the weekend of like the 30th, I want to say. Either way, I wanted to talk a little bit about Zerg versus Zerg and why it makes everyone a little sad. Why it makes everyone's face hurt. So, the real issue I feel that arises with Zerg vs. Zerg is the fact that all the basic units for Zerg, that I guess I want to say the tier 1 units, but I hate using that tier language. But sure, all your tier 1 units for Zerg are all insanely good. Zerglings are so stupidly fast, especially on creep, which both of you have, that it's very hard to catch up to them. You see a lot of Zerglings like looping through the opponent's base and all that good jazz. And being able to run right out, no problem. Banelings are insanely good. Because if Zerglings are good and you're making a lot of Zerglings, then one Baneling hit can kill all of them. There's some great moments from, I still remember NASL mid-season, where we got the chance to see, I think it was one Baneling killing off like 20 of Katz's Zerglings. That was awesome. And the Roach. Of course, the Roach is a super ultra beastly beast unit. It can just deal a lot of damage. It can take a lot of damage. It has that armor, so it can absorb Zergling hits. So you can do a lot of ramp blocking with it. So, what happens? We have the situation where a lot of players feel pressured not to make drones. We see a lot of Zergling Baneling versus Zergling Baneling craziness. We see a lot of people just making a lot of roaches. We see a lot of people feeling lost because what happens in a usual Zerg vs. Terran or something like that? What are you looking for? What do you scout for? You'd say something like, is he making a whole bunch of barracks? Or is he making a whole bunch of factories? Or is he getting one factory really, really fast? Or is he getting all his barracks first? These are the questions. I drooled. Sorry, I was eating dinner right before the show. These are big adjustments that you can make because you're looking for something very clearly separate. But the problem is in Zerg vs. Zerg, it can become very, very hard to identify what it is that's going on. And in particular, there's a whole lot of assumptions that you have to be very careful not to make. And with all the similarity going on, what I'm going to begin by stating, just as a general idea, is that you have to zoom in really, really far. You're not really going to see much difference in structures. You're not really going to see much different in terms of unit mixes. It's all going to be Zerglings, Roaches, and Banelings a lot at the start. However, we can do some very clever counting that goes on in terms of how he's spending his larva. So in part 1, actually in all the Zerg vs. Zergs that we're going to see today, these are Sen's games from the North American Star League. He defeated Xenio first round. That's what we'll be looking at part 1 of this daily. In part 2, we'll be looking at his games versus Dark Force, and in part 3, we'll be looking at his 3rd, 4th place match against July. So I want to begin with a very simple game where we're going to see Sen do a very nice early attack and run over his opponent. Now, I want to talk a little bit about assumptions and what can happen in terms of... Actually, I'll even pause to come back. There's this big assumption that happens that a lot of people are very bad about slipping into, which is the following. For the most part in a game, you shouldn't be looking for ways to win. You should be looking for ways not to lose. You want to spend all your time finding the weakest points of your gameplay and your biggest concerns and smoothing that out and fixing that. What you don't want to be doing is trying to find out where to win and to do that. Because then you end up in these ugly situations. Like here's one. How many of you have a favorite matchup and a least favorite matchup? The incorrect mindset is, yes, I got my favorite matchup. Yeah, let's play this. And you watch replays of your favorite matchup, and you always get excited to play your favorite matchup. Because you can win a lot. What you really need to do is look at your weakest matchup and say, oh, that's my weakest. I really need to work on that. I'm going to work on that. I'm going to drill through that. I'm going to figure this thing out, right? And you're going to try to peel that sucker away. And this happens especially a lot in ZvZ, where people aren't quite sure what to look for, where they will do something like, I'm going to be building a lot of Banelings early to defend against huge Zergling attacks, because if he runs up with Zerglings and I kill him, then I'll be in a huge lead. But you end up in these little problems where, what if he just doesn't make the Zerglings, right? What if he just doesn't do it? That's actually very similar to what we're going to see in this game. We're going to see Sen do a lot of careful observing, and there's going to be this divergence point in the game where you should be very careful not to confuse it with Sen just making a lot of units. We're going to see that as we step into the game. But first, let's just zoom on through. This is game number uno between Sen and Zinio. At least the first one we're going to watch. There's one game that Sen loses, but why the hell would we watch that? Honestly, why on earth would we look at a loss of anyone who makes this? Who would ever dare do that? Oh, God, Sen, you are so the frickin' man, dude. Man. All right, cool. Let's come back to the game. So here's a situation that many of you ZvZers will end up in. We see drones being built. Oh my gosh, wait a minute. I can see everything that my opponent is doing. What on earth am I going to do? Well, I guess I'll expand because, you know, if you have the Sen cam, you're going, well, it doesn't look like there's a pool here. I'm expanding. It's safe to expand. Great. Okay. And hey, here's, oh wow, look, he's expanding. And look, both of them are making 2 drones. There's an extractor. There's an extractor. Both of them are making an extra drone. They're both at 16 food. And look, here's a pool. And here's a pool. This is so unbelievably frickin' common. Where both players will be in a mirror situation. If I just go look at the top tab, we see that Zinio maybe got ahead by 1 drone. But no, not for long. Oh, another overlord, or another drone being made by Sen. Herp-de-derp-de-blah-de-blah. So we're going to pause it when all of a sudden we're going to see a deviation, right? So here is the Zergling speed will be started here in a moment. We see both of them making 2 queens, both of them still making drones. This is all very normal. This is all very normal. Here's a Zergling speed from one player, and we see a Roach Warren go down for Sen. And we also see a Baneling nest pop up for Zinio. Now, let's halt here for a moment and just look at what both players are doing with their overlords. We see Sen pulling back to get good vision. We see Zinio also pulling away to get some vision. He's keeping an overlord here to do some spotting on the mineral line. We're not so worried about that. Let's first take a look at Zinio. So what Zinio's doing is he's getting fast Zergling speed for 2 reasons. One, Zergling are obviously very, very good in this matchup, so I want to get that Zergling speed upgrade to be able to both deal damage and defend against his Zerglings, but more importantly, I'm going to be making this Baneling nest. So that way, I have a couple of options. And this is where it becomes very important that you can list out all the broad categories of things that you can do. If you get a Baneling nest right now, there are 2 big things that I can think of that you could do. 1. I said that 1 very aggressively. 1, the first thing that you could do is you could just build a couple of Banelings for defense. You could just get your Zerglings with speed, leave 4 Banelings at home, and then you are defended against a huge Zergling attack. Or what you could do, excuse me, is you could begin just Banelinging your opponent to death. You could just start hurling huge numbers of units at him. I would argue that it's slightly unlikely for Zenio to be doing that just because he made those a few extra drones in production. We're seeing a couple more drones pop out for him. Now let's do the same thing for Sen. We see he's building his Roach Warren. And let's actually stick on the Sen cam because there's some very important counting that's going to happen. Sen is positioning himself so he can continue to get a good count on what units are popping out. He's going to be adding on some Zerglings in a moment. This is all very reasonable. And yes, he's getting his Zergling speed. He's only ever seen 2 Zerglings pop out here. And interestingly, this is where the most important scouting happens. I mean, you could suicide in and see a Baneling nest, but that wouldn't really help because he's probably... that's one of his very reasonable options. Now, for Sen, let's do the same thing. What are some of our big, broad options that we can do with a Roach Warren? Well, we can use them to defend. What if my opponent builds a whole bunch of Zerglings, tries to run them in? I can block with them. Just as in Zenio's case, where we had a whole bunch of Banelings that we could make for defense. And the second one is we could go for some sort of early attack. In a Zerg vs. Zerg, it's very important that you consider all the reasonable options that your opponent is going to be doing. And say, can I beat that? Can I beat that? Can I beat that? Or do I have a good way to deal with this? And do I have a good way to deal with this? And do I have a good way to deal with this? And a lot of times you'll have an answer for 1 or 2 of them, but you won't have a good answer for the third. And that's when you really need to rethink the way you're doing deviations in your gameplay. Because we're going to see Sen do, honestly, quite a simple play. But it's important to see that there is a trigger to this play. So Sen has been skimping out on his Zerglings quite a bit because he's basically just seen no Zerglings pop out for his opponent. And drones are actually very good against Zerglings. So we see a big swell of roaches pop out. Right now, these are some defensive frickin' roaches. These are some defensive roaches. We don't see anything out of Zenio's Baneling nest yet because he's been making primarily units. So let's go back to the Sen cam. Big swell of roaches. Why would we make this swell of roaches? Well, if our opponent... let's consider a couple of options. What could our opponent be doing? Let's talk about first him attacking us. What if our opponent makes a bunch of Zerglings at the start of the game? Well, you know what? I have these roaches here. They can defend the ramp, and roaches are pretty good against Zerglings. What if my opponent is also going roaches? Well, Sen has not made any Zerglings. He's wasted no money thus far, so he's just going to get as many roaches out as he possibly can. So if you're going roaches, you either don't have as good of an economy, and when you attack, my better economy will help me in the defense, or you made as many drones as I did and were equal in battle. Sen's getting the Zergling speed upgrade because this is going to give him some options for aggression. We see speed Zerglings beginning to move out right now. And amazingly, this small set of Zerglings can help us a lot. We're going to be looking at a lot of moments in these games where we're seeing sets of Zerglings and we can count things like this has been 3 larvae. If we come to the drone count, we see that it's, well, we see there's 26 drones for our good friend Sen. He's actually pulled some guys off mining. He's starting to make some Zerglings at this point in time because he's going for a big attack. And seeing these Zerglings can be a good indicator to us of what his composition of units is. Well, if our opponent is making a bunch of roaches, then you know what? I'm just not that really concerned because he has too many Zerglings. Look, we see more Zerglings beginning to sort of stream down. We actually have lots of Zerglings starting to stream down. And this is going to be a pretty clear attack moment for Sen. As we're going to see, the Banelings are going to be used in a defensive fashion. Now, you'll note that Sen can't actually see what's going on here. He can't see that it's a Baneling defense. We're actually going to see, what, I'm going to stop talking in hypotheticals. Let me just show you the game. Come on. I'm just going to show you what ends up happening. So Sen makes a whole bunch of roaches and rallies his Zerglings. And here's the clear kill-off. He waltzes right in, keeps his roaches at the front. Not a big deal. But here's the mistake that's very easy to make. Too often people will see this and say, oh, I'm going to play a Zerg vs. Zerg where I only make... actually, we'll even pull back a little earlier. Where I'm only going to make drones, And then suddenly, I'm going to begin building roaches, and then after my roaches, I'm going to pull guys off gas, and I'm just going to attack with zerglings. This is what feels rock, paper, scissory if you just speed right into this play without thinking about it. We haven't seen a lot of zerglings in the early game. It's likely not going to be a huge all-in. We can get away with not making early zerglings. Okay, we're making more drones. We're starting to account for the possibilities of him powering really hard with roaches. What if he's going for, what if we move out to this attack and our opponent has way more roaches than we do? Think about that. What if we move out and he has way, way, way more roaches than we do? Well, then you know what? We just walk home. There's no way for him to catch up to our units because roaches are the same speed as roaches. It's an opportunity for us to make a little, a poke, a reason to poke. And we can force a lot of units to be produced, and when we have our speedy zerglings, we can also deal with counterattacks quite well. I mean, no matter what, your timing has to be good. This is a good timing play, but this isn't exactly an all-in, because in this matchup, these little edges are so huge. Like, just having... or excuse me, in the unit tab, just having, you know, a couple more drones for Zenio is 5 larvae he's not able to actually spend on units. So as we see, Sen is just going to make this easy play. One of the options was that he went for a Baneling defense, which we easily kill off. One of the options is he's going for a big Zergling number, which our roaches will deal well with, especially if we have these Zerglings backing up. Another option is he went crazy defensive, which is fine because roaches are so good that we can put pressure on him. And the best option for Zenio is for, or excuse me, the best option for Sen is just to like pull back at that point in time and exploit other edges that he has right now, namely map control. Could possibly be going for an upgrade. But this is a very clear, easy attack. We've seen a few extra speedlings dart down into the map. We could make maybe 12 Zerglings and just halt the assault. And all in all, this ends up being a very clean, easy win. And there is the good game. Now we're going to take a brief look at game number 2. And I have to let StarCraft completely shut down and then completely begin rebooting again. Game number 2, we're going to see, I would say, a much less defined timing attack that still kind of has a similar feel to it, where we get just little glimpses of information, and we can use those glimpses of information to make a really good timing attack. In this game, we saw not a lot of Zerglings at the start, and then we ended up seeing a lot, or maybe 6 to 8 Zerglings pop out, which gave us a little bit more confidence to push at that point in time. Let's see, the round of 16, Sen versus Zenio. Man, those names are hard to say. We're going to look at now is a game that was on Crossfire. We got Zenio versus Sen from NASL Grand Finals. So let's see some more usual business going on. But in this circumstance, you're going to see the differences pop up a little bit more clearly. Because instead of them both doing an identical play, we're actually going to see Zergling Baneling out of Zenio, and we're going to see Roaches out of Sen. Both of them are opening up identically. Again, where's my edge if we're both doing the same thing? Sen gets his pool a little bit later. We could read into that. We could talk all about it, but we're just actually not going to. Both of them get their Zergling speed very quickly. They both get queens really early. And we see Zenio only getting 2 Zerglings, while Sen is getting 4 in the unit station. We do see that there's 1 more drone out for Zenio. These are little edges that, if you're exploiting properly, you can use to get ahead. But it looks like Sen going to send out 6 Zerglings, and both players go back to droning. We also see a Baneling nest going down right now. And what we're going to see Sen throw down is a Roach Warren. Now, let's go to the Sen cam. Sen sees absolutely nothing. Let's even remove the production tab. Now, at this point in time, you can begin asking yourself questions like, what if my opponent is making a whole bunch of Zerglings? What if he's just flooding gigantic numbers of Zerglings? Well, we see him playing a little bit defensively at his front. Zerglings are going to take a decent amount of time to get from base to base. We see some money being saved up from Sen. And he is going to throw down a Baneling nest. He's going to cancel it and build a Roach Warren. I'm not overly obsessed with this. I kind of feel like he was doing it maybe as a trick, but it's still not going to be an important thing. Important thing to note, though, is that we see our Zerg player Sen getting a lot of drones. He's made almost no drones in the unit station. Or excuse me, he's made almost all drones. In the unit station, we see he does have these 6 Zerglings. And he has a second queen. Now, I want you to think about all the openings that kill you right now. Right? Like, well, what if he's making a huge Zergling Baneling bus? Well, we have some Zerglings of our own. We also have speed for that versatility. We're getting roaches, but most importantly, we have our queens to defend. We'll actually see this pop into play in the Dark Force games, so we're feeling kind of defended. There's even a spine crawler going down for Sen. Just in case. There's a lot of precautionary stuff going down because, holy cow, look at the number of drones that's being produced. Sen is gaining some amazing information here. This is tremendous amounts of information. We now see Banelings. What is not a threat? Roaches, okay? If someone gets 2 Banelings that fast, it's just not going to be roaches. It's not like someone's like, I'm going to quickly get Baneling's nest and immediately transition to roaches. I'm going to have a power timing push where I have 4 roaches. Ugh, like, it's just not good. So we immediately know, okay, no roaches incoming. We're going to see just a lot of Ling Baneling numbers are the likeliest offense that will be thrown at us. And we see a couple more Banelings get thrown down here. I mean, we try to get a little edge. It's maybe not so pronounced. Our queens are going to head back home, feeling at least fairly comfortable. And suddenly I have something that I know I can begin worrying about a little bit. A Ling Baneling all in, or a Ling Baneling expand. You're noticing that what I'm doing is I started with a huge list, and now I'm crossing stuff off, and I'm zooming in a little bit more. Oh, he can be going Ling Baneling. I got a little bit of information from those Banelings, and that's huge, right? But still, I need to worry about this all-in, so I'm going to position this Overlord here, and there's this really cool moment where you'll see Sen, if you get this game, you'll see him check these Overlords, see that there's a hatch, and then just drift it away. That's clearly the information he was going for. If he sees someone else going for the hatch, he just matches the hatchery. He's going to be making roaches basically no matter what, but if for some reason a Ling Baneling all-in is coming in, he can just cancel the hatch, and now he's starting to slowly build up this huge force. There's a very subtle moment in gameplay right here when we end up seeing this many units. Now, I want you to just note, if you just glance at this, this is about, it looks like 12 Zerglings. I mean, as we can see, it's exactly 12 Zerglings. We also see that there were some Banelings. I recall seeing 2 other Banelings. I think they're somewhere here. All right, cool. So, in terms of larva, you can deduce how many units he has based on how many units you have. So what we're going to see is, actually, let me remove the production. If you see, let's see here, this is 6 larvae, 7, 8 larvae. I've spent 3, and here's another 5. Oh, he should have an equal economy to me. We should have the same number of drones. Actually, Sen has a few more. Did I miscount? Oh, yeah, I did. I'm sorry. I was counting these roaches that were in production, right? But we can see, okay, yeah, so we have a better or at least about equal. What if you were there and you saw 16 Zerglings? Or even 18 Zerglings, a couple more. You can immediately get a sense of his drone count. Like, immediately. You don't need to check his mineral line. You don't need to get vision of his entire army. You can say something like, oh, okay, I have this many food worth of roaches out on the map. And now all of a sudden we're going to see a kind of cool play from Sen. Yeah, he's doing all this defensive stuff here. He's starting to make more roaches. And what we're actually going to see Sen do is something very similar to the game beforehand, where he's in his mind saying, well, if you made this many Zerglings and Banelings, I know that your economy can't possibly be better than mine. So I'm just going to begin flooding with roaches, and I'm going to do a huge, gigantic attack that should likely kill you off. I'm actually going to go to the Sen cam. And you'll note that he's making a Baneling nest. Why? Well, we've just concluded that his economy is about equal to ours. And he's been going Zergling Baneling. So if my opponent begins going roaches, then all of a sudden I know for a fact that he cannot humanly possibly get as many roaches as I do, because I started early. The only way he can really end up hoping to beat me is if he has a lot of Zerglings and Banelings and maybe even some spine crawlers. So what Sen's going to do is he's just going to build a whole bunch of roaches and move in there. Just by having this little difference and by being able to count this many units, Sen's going to be able to just non-stop build a whole bunch of roaches and move out. And if for some reason our opponent Zergy guy has plenty of spine crawlers up here for defense, then we can easily just pull back and begin droning up and know that he had to have committed a lot of his resources to the defense, and that his spine crawlers really will not be helping him as you go into late game, because you can gain so much more map control by having the unit in this matchup. And then, per usual, we see a huge swell of units come to the front. And if we come and look at Zenio's vision, he's making the spine crawlers that he needs to. He's transitioned to roaches. He's getting himself a +1. He's going for late game, and all this stuff looks good. But the real problem is that he didn't do any damage with this Zergling Baneling business at all. He went for, like, what I like to call kind of a tweenish build, where he's like, I'm going to build some units to kind of be a little bit aggressive, and then I'm going to kind of get an expansion early to kind of get a decent economy up, so I'm going to do a little bit of both. In a mirror matchup, tweenness can get you murdered. So what we see Sen do a lot is he'll build a lot of drones and build a lot of roaches and hit a point where he says, am I going to keep building roaches to exploit this thing? Or am I going to completely stop building roaches and build a whole bunch of drones? So what we see come from Sen is he just hit the, yeah, I'm just going to drill right in here for an attack. And because of the tweeniness of Zenio's build, instead of being a build that kind of got an expo fast and kind of did a little pressure, it instead becomes a build where he cannot really do much of anything very well at all. It kind of has bad harass and kind of has a late expansion. And as we can see, roaches are very, very good against banelings. I mean, it makes sense for Zenio to try to mass banelings at this point because he has higher Zergling numbers and he's trying to increase their efficiency over time. But all in all, Sen has a fairly easy play. So basically what we saw is in both games, Sen is exploiting the fact that if a player makes banelings and you don't make a lot of Zerglings to abuse them, you kind of have to be careful. Like, Zenio makes defensive banelings in both of these games, and Sen just punishes it twice in a row with really easy timing, like super ultra easy timing. You can make some defensive banelings and then make a whole lot of Zerglings and really mess with him. And while you're making a lot of Zerglings, you can sneak out some drones. And then when you get roaches, you have like 24 Zerglings. You're behind on roaches, but you still have so many Zerglings that your opponent is uncomfortable moving out and this sort of thing. But it's the classic tweener problem that we saw come out of Zenio, where he kind of tried to do a little bit of this, kind of tried to do a little bit of that. And even as we come to the unit count near the end of the game, actually let me get closer to the end of the game. As we get to this unit count, Zenio actually does not have hugely many workers, just like 5 more, and then he starts to really get a little bit out of line with how many workers he's getting. And what you'd imagine is, if for some reason Zenio did make all the extra drones that he needed to, if for some reason he did make all the extra drones that he needed to, if for some reason Zenio didn't make those extra drones, if Zenio did make all these extra units and did set himself up in a good place to defend, we can still see that Sen has a ton of units and plenty of leisure time to build a lot of drones at this moment. So it's almost as counterintuitive when you actually can't quite do damage. You just back off and build a little bit more units instead of trying to, like, make your units super useful in some sort of attacking fashion. And Sen's just going to kill things very straightforwardly. He rallies Zerglings, and it's a pretty straightforward game. So we're going to be taking a quick break before we jump into part 2, which is where Sen is going to play against Dark Force. And in those games, we're going to look at Sen's ability to play defensively instead of doing these huge timing attacks that we see in these games. So for any of you curious about that, don't go anywhere. Part 2 of the Day 9 Daily is going to come up right after this.